that today more than 10% of the Venezuelan population is living outside of its territory. And this also makes Venezuela the second largest migration crisis in the world after Syria. It is considered that around 65% of the Venezuelans that are fleeing the country are living in four main countries. They are Colombia. Colombia is receiving around 1.5 million Venezuelans today. It is followed by Peru, with around 800,000 Venezuelans living in this country, and Peru is followed by Ecuador and Chile, which roughly have about 300,000 Venezuelans each of them. Today we could say that Bogota is one of the 10 largest Venezuelan cities in the world, compared with Syria, in which Turkey is receiving about 1,000 Syrians per day. Colombia, at the border with Venezuela, is receiving around 1,600 Venezuelans per day. The speed is increasing, and this means that we might have around 8 million Venezuelans living as migrants in other countries by the end of 2020. This would make Venezuela the largest migration crisis in the world, and many Venezuelans come from all social classes to Colombia and to the rest of Latin America, but many of them are actually very poor. This is the situation of the Venezuelan crisis nowadays, and it is a situation that is somehow getting out of control. Venezuela was a very attractive country until very recently, and even 10 years ago there were still some Colombians that preferred to live in Venezuela and not in Colombia due to better economic conditions there. The GDP in Venezuela is only half of the GDP Venezuela used to have in 2013. There is a shortage of healthcare services supply, and there is also a shortage in food supply. We have an atmosphere of generalized violence. Here we can say that the impacts are rather mixed. We can talk about one negative impact on the Venezuelan economy. There would be a decrease in the economic growth of the country due to this flow of Venezuelans out of the country. But on the other hand, there is also a positive impact in terms of the remittances that these Venezuelans will be sending or are already sending to their relatives back in their home countries. There are many Venezuelans that now depend on these remittances in order to find food. But on the other hand, we can mention also some bad impacts, bad long-term impacts that this migration might be having for the stabilization of the political regime in Venezuela. What I mean by that is that as the Venezuelan government is receiving all these remittances from the Venezuelan, that means that not only oil but also the remittances from migrants are becoming an extra source of foreign currency in Venezuela, and that might help the economy to become stable, and that might give more oxygen to the current regime to maintain its grip on power. On the other hand, of course, more migrants living outside of Venezuela would mean less political opposition in the streets of Caracas. It's difficult to know to what extent this bad effect would imply that the political regime would survive for more years and decades, or if this effect is small compared with the degree of the economic collapse that the country is experimenting. the impacts on Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, and other countries all over Latin America. And here the short answer is the impacts depending on the actions that the governments do in order to receive this Venezuelan population. So actually, when you have more migrants, you have more people in a country, and these people are working, these people are consuming, and these people are paying taxes at the same time, and this is of course good for the economy. If the government decides to do the right things, it will help the Venezuelan population to adapt to the country and to be integrated in the labor force, and this would mean that the impact on the economy would be rather positive. Here again, the answer is it depends, depending on what the governments of the countries of destination decide to do with this migration. It could imply increased diversity in these countries and also the gratitude of the Venezuelans that are arriving to these countries. We need more involvement, and we need more resources and more donations from the international community. Just to give you an example, the international donations gathered so far for the Syrian crisis mean that more or less every Syrian refugee has received about $5,000 coming from these international donations. In contrast with the crisis in Venezuela, every single Venezuelan migrant has received only about $100. International organizations such as the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and the International Organization for Migration, these United Nations agencies, have been already involved in this crisis, and they need to be more involved. First of all, they need to go to the international community and look for more help. They need to continue doing regional coordination in order to better distribute the burden of the migration crisis among the different countries in Latin America. And additionally, the government should increase their campaigns to prevent xenophobia. Every single citizen needs to be more empathetic. We need more empathy, and we need more solidarity in order to help integrate these Venezuelan communities in our societies.